Welcome to a special episode of Nature Bats Last. No, this will not be an Edge of Extinction episode, because it will be a little bit longer. It was inspired by John Musselman's recommendation that Guy review a Hot Planet essay called Shut Up Franzen, written by Kate Marvel.
For Scientific American.
For Scientific American.
So tell us a little bit about who Kate Marvel is. It's right there on the last page.
So Kate Marvel is a climate scientist at Columbia and the NASA Goddard Institute of Space Studies. She received a PhD in theoretical physics from Cambridge University, woo, and has worked at Stanford University, the Carnegie Institution, and Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory.
Let's stop right there.
Yeah.
Okay, so she works at Columbia, home of Halfway Hansen, and she works at the Goddard Institute alongside Gavin Schmidt, who lies every time he gives a presentation and every time he writes a paper. He lies by omission of the aerosol masking effect. These are not reliable people, and Kate Marvel had just thrown herself into the category of not a reliable so-called climate scientist. She's responding to the paper in the New Yorker by Jonathan Franzen called What If We Stopped Pretending? But let's talk for just a minute about the headline, about the command,
This disgusting headline, Shut Up Franzen. So apparently she doesn't respect freedom of speech that is embedded in our Constitution. Okay, so the Constitution was shredded, but, some of us still kind of respect that idea, right? This really is 1984.
She's responding to this paper, as I mentioned, by Jonathan Franzen in the New Yorker called What If We Stopped Pretending? And after the lead, when he mentions Kafka, he points out that today the scientific evidence with respect to climate change verges on irrefutable. If you're younger than 60, you have a good chance of witnessing the radical destabilization of life on Earth. I would say if you're under the age of, living, you're already experiencing.
Bahamians are experiencing now.
You're witnessing the radical destabilization of life on Earth.
Mm-hmm.
And here's the examples he gives. Massive crop failures.
Yeah.
Hello, Australia, United States, Asia,
Yeah.
Europe. Apocalyptic fires. Seems I've heard about those.
Was there like a little fire in Alaska or something?
Yes, and the Amazon.
Oh, Siberia.
And Africa.
Places
All over the planet.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Within the last few years, Tasmanian rainforest has
Mm-hmm.
caught fire a few times. Anyway,
Yeah.
massive crop failures, apocalyptic fires were already there. Imploding economies. Hello? Venezuela? Epic flooding. The Midwest of the United States as one example.
Mm-hmm.
For example, in Nebraska, every single river mile in Nebraska, which is a lot, was above flood stage at one point this year. Massive crop failures, apocalyptic fires, imploding economies, epic flooding, hundreds of millions of refugees fleeing regions made uninhabitable by extreme heat or permanent drought. Is anybody familiar with what's going on the southern border of the United States?
I guess not.
People are fleeing. When I was on tour in Western Europe in 2014, there was a refugee crisis as people were fleeing the Middle East and Northern Africa and going to Europe where they were not at all welcome because they were unable to grow food.
Mm-hmm.
It's happening in the South Pacific, in island states in the South Pacific, where because of sea level rise, we have a refugee crisis. We have a refugee crisis in Alaska, for crying out loud.
Yeah.
You're telling me this is going to happen in the future? It's already underway. And then he goes, if you're under 30, you're all but guaranteed to witness it. If you're under 30, what? Under 30 minutes from now?
Right. If you're
Under 30 feet tall?
under 30 feet.
It's already happening.
Yeah.
As described
It
in
is
that
9/11 today, by the way. I think some of us have witnessed some things happening since 18 years ago.
some apocalyptic things.
Right.
And Franzen goes on, again, in his article in the New Yorker. Even at this late date, expressions of unrealistic hope continue to abound. Hardly a day seems to pass without my reading that it's time to, quote, roll up our sleeves, end quote, and, quote, save the planet, end quote. That the problem of climate change can be solved, in quotes, if we summon the collective will. Although this message was probably still true in 1988, I doubt it, when the science became fully clear. That's the year that James Hansen testified to Congress, by the way, 1988.
Yeah.
We've emitted as much atmospheric carbon in the past 30 years, actually the last 25, but who am I to correct him, as we did in the previous 2 centuries of industrialization. The facts have changed, but somehow the message remains the same. The message is, we must hope for a better future. Based on what?
Right. Can I just say, I just love the disgust that Franzen exhibits in that paragraph. He is as disgusted as we are because, you know, we've been activists for decades trying to fix this, and no one has done anything. Oh, you look a little thing here. Oh, yeah, we saved a little block of whatever, some neighborhood of this or whatever. But seriously, nothing real has happened. And this, her opening sentence is, we are, I promise you, you know you're in for a lie when somebody says, I promise you, not doomed. No matter what Jonathan Franzen says. That's how she opens it. She opens with a blatant lie. You know, the people that she works with have been lying to us for decades. Just today, I was looking online, and they're talking about global dimming in 2005, based on an article from 1997. But we've known about global dimming since 1929.
1929 was the first peer-reviewed journal on the topic, but it's been largely unmentioned by paid climate scientists, by the corporate media, and by governments of the world. Benjamin Franklin mentioned it in 1783, global dimming as a result of a volcano. Nobody wanted to pursue that path. So Franzen goes on like this, just to tell you how inhibited the message is. Things will get very bad, but maybe not too soon, and maybe not for everyone, maybe not for me.
That's
so he's
really
still clinging.
Interesting, yeah.
He's still clinging to the notion that there is something that can be done.
Well, he's also, I think what he's also doing, and I don't want to be a psychoanalyst for somebody I've never met, but I feel like what he's saying is like what we all, you know, when we all picture getting through the bottleneck, it's like, we're the ones who get through it, right?
Absolutely.
You know, we the ones, we make it. We're the last ones in the bunker.
And then he writes something that further indicates his ignorance and the lying exhibited by almost every paid climate scientist. We need to approach zero net emissions globally in the next 3 decades.
That's not him lying. That's just based on the information, the limited information that these really illegitimate climate scientists.
This is his interpretation of the IPCC. That's my point. The IPCC, James Hansen, after his 2011 paper, he did one interview when he talked about the aerosol masking factor, global dimming, and then he disappeared completely on the topic. And now people are talking about as if we can meet 2C.
Yeah.
And Kate Marvel herself in this article admits that it's almost impossible to meet 2C.
Well, wasn't
and
2C,
so she pushes that away.
And 2C was a made-up number.
Yeah, 2C was a made-up number. The
by
better
an
number.
economist.
Yeah, by William Nordhaus in 1977, an economist.
Who the hell is he anyway?
And it was the United Nations Advisory Group on Greenhouse Gases that came out in October of 1990 and indicated that 1C was the absolute upper limit. Science writer...
1C, let's repeat that.
1C, that's right. Science writer and speaker Spratt indicated in 2014, I think, that we probably triggered those self-reinforcing feedback loops that the United Nations Advisory Group on Greenhouse Gases was so worried about. We probably triggered those somewhere between 1/4 and 1/2 degree Celsius above the 1750 baseline. Folks, that was a long time ago. And now we can't get Kate Marvel, who claims to be a climate scientist, to even mention the aerosol masking factor. We can't get Jonathan Franzen, who's a journalist, to admit to the aerosol masking factor, probably because he doesn't know about it. Because he has been captured by the dominant narrative that all we have to do is reduce greenhouse gas emissions.
Which is what everyone's promulgating, even Extinction Rebellion. We've got to reduce, but if we reduce our emissions, I swear, we die faster we accelerate warming at an unprecedented rate, we will melt every last bit of ice on the planet, and we don't want that. We really don't.
As little as a 20% reduction in industrial activity triggers a 1 degree Celsius global average temperature rise. This according to Rosenfeld, senior author of a paper in Science published on February 8th. And during an interview, he indicated that we had and quoting the paper by Levy et al. In 2013, he indicated that we had underestimated by half the global dimming, or the aerosol masking effect. Let me go on with a little bit more from Franzen. Call me a pessimist or call me a humanist, but I don't see human nature fundamentally changing anytime soon. I can run 10,000 scenarios through my model, and he's talking about a mental model here, and in not one of them do I see the 2-degree target being met. Of course not. And even Marvel finally admits that we aren't going to meet 2C. Some climate activists argue that if we publicly admit that the problem can't be solved, it will discourage people from taking any ameliorative action at all. And I'm frequently accused of taking away people's hope, as if that's a bad thing, and discouraging people from acting. But let's think about what are the right actions to be taken here. Are they to dismantle the economy, as the figurehead liar of deep green resistance claims? No, not at all. That drives us to extinction even faster by reducing industrial emissions. So, and Franzen recognizes this. Some climate activists argue that if we publicly admit that the problem can't be solved, it will discourage people from taking any ameliorative action at all. This seems to me not only a patronizing calculation, but an ineffectual one, given how little progress we have to show for it to date. We certainly do have no progress to show for it to date.
Zero!
And then he goes on, and he's conflicted, and you can understand why, because he bought into the reduce the emissions narrative. So he goes on, in the shorter term, however, half measures are better than no measures. Halfway cutting our emissions would make the immediate effects of warming somewhat less severe, and it would postpone the point of no return. No, it would hasten the point of no return. It would cutting emissions by half
50%.
We're dead in a very short period of time after that, because quickly after that there's no habitat for human beings. Less than a 20% reduction in industrial activity causes a 1 degree Celsius global average temperature rise. That's tremendous.
Explain
We're on the hottest planet ever experienced by Homo sapiens.
Right. Explain
right now.
What does 1 degree Celsius rise feel? Because a lot of people forget what that means. They think, oh, it's 80 degrees now, it'll be 81 degrees. No, that's not what that means.
And the relevant transformation to Fahrenheit is 1.8. So 1 degree Celsius is 1.8 degrees Fahrenheit. But this is global average. And so a pretty decent analogy is what happens to your body when you experience a 1.8 degree Fahrenheit temperature rise.
Right. You
have a fever. So we're currently at about 1.8 degrees Celsius above the 1750 baseline. Let's call the 1750 baseline normal. That's when civilizations begin to pop up all over the planet. The ability to grow grains at large scale was suddenly experienced by humans for the first time.
So right now, what is the average global temperature? Is it 60 something?
It's about 1.8 C above the 1750 baseline, which was 13.5 C. So it's about 15.3 degrees Celsius. And I'm not going to convert that to Fahrenheit.
You do the math.
Pause right there. Get out your calculator and figure out what 15.3 Celsius is.
But one above that, so 13 is about 50 or 60 degrees. And then I'm just guesstimating. I think it's around there. So 1 degree above that Celsius is in the 70s and 80s. And
but
you don't want that.
No, but again, it's not in the 70s and 80s.
No.
It's not. It's 1 degree Celsius, 1.8 degrees Fahrenheit. That's all the change that we're talking about. It seems like a small thing, but put it into your body.
Right.
We're talking about Earth here, and the appropriate analogy is the human body. So we're already 1.8 degrees Celsius above the 1750 baseline, what we call normal. Okay, so our normal body temperature is 37 degrees Celsius. Add 1.8, 98.6. So add 1.8 to that, that is 18 squared, I think 2.6 degrees, approximately 2.6 degrees Fahrenheit above normal. So that's a low-grade fever. Add 1 degree to that suddenly, now all of a sudden it's a serious fever.
Yeah.
And so that's another 1.8 added on to the 2.6 or whatever I said.
Pretty shitty when you have a
and
99.
so now we're up over 4 degrees. So now we're at 98.6 plus more than 4 is about 103. 103 temperature.
That's
for Fahrenheit.
That can
folks.
cause seizures.
Yeah. And if you maintain that temperature for an extended period of time,
You dehydrate and you die.
dehydrate and you die. You die from overheating.
Yeah.
And yet we think that planet Earth can handle that for an extended period of time.
Yeah.
And so the consequences are felt at the ecosystem level initially, and that's where we currently are experiencing profound changes with the loss of life for so many different species, 150 to 250 species, 150 to 200 species a day being driven to extinction, estimated the United Nations Environment Group in August 2010. That's almost 10 years ago. So it certainly has accelerated since then. Franzen goes on. A false hope of salvation can be actively harmful. He's echoing my work here in pointing out that hope, false hope in particular, is a really bad idea because it takes us down the wrong path. Finally, near the close of his article, he points out, keep doing the right thing for this planet, yes, but also keep trying to save what you love, specifically, a community and institution of wild places species that's in trouble, and take heart in your small successes. Any good thing you do now is arguably a hedge against a hotter future and a worse future.
Yeah.
So he's
talking about right action, which is something you talk about all the time.
Right.
And you know,
and not being attached to the outcome and thinking it might make things better in the long run. And his whole focus is on the community, on him and his life and the community and how he acts and what he expects how he expects other people to act. So it's very local, which is very consistent with my message.
And what I suspect, the vitriol against what he wrote here is not so much about the lack of hope about fixing this, but you know, he takes on the Green New Deal.
Right.
And I suspect that's why all of these disgusting people have come out of their little woodworks and attacked him, because the Green New Deal is about corporate money. It's not about saving the planet. It's more garbage. It's more mining for rare earth minerals. It's more building dams. It's more this bullshit that doesn't solve the deeper problem. We are an animal that creates energy, that creates heat, and civilization is a heat engine, and we can't stop it. And the Green New Deal just says, hey, let's just do more of that. We'll just call it green.
Right,
and
it's classic green.
Yeah, we'll make a little
Absolutely.
green, so it's better. It's better that way.
Now, Marvel does mention that there are feedback processes to consider. And she sends a whopping paragraph on those, sort of describing what they are and indicating that they won't affect us in our lifetimes. And then toward the end of her article, she says, even in the best of all possible worlds, I cannot offer the certainty of safety. Doom is a possibility. It may be that we have already awakened a sleeping monster that will, in the end, devour the world. Poor choice of words, but she is admitting that it may have actually happened, and then telling Franzen to shut up.
Right.
Specifically, shut up. This is a government authority, a government representative, a government employee taking the classic fascist approach of terminating freedom of speech.
Yeah, she sent
Shut
him a memo.
up, Franzen.
Usually you get the memo in secret, but this is a public memo. And I think he's been getting it left and right.
I'm going to read from Kate Marvel's final paragraph, which exposes her as a complete non-scientist. Even though she starts with, but I am a scientist. And then she gives away that she's not a scientist. I quote, but I am a scientist, which means I believe in miracles. There has never been one. There has never been a miracle.
I mean,
and we've known this forever. And then she goes to Earth. As I said, I live on one. I live on a miracle. She says, we are improbable life on a perfect planet. Again, this is not scientific terminology. This is not a scientific conclusion. This is completely infusing your so-called scientific message with your own personal experience and perspective. It's a perfect planet. Maybe if you're a well-paid Caucasian person
if
of
you're
a certain
virus
age,
or a bacteria,
right?
there's plenty to eat.
She goes on and talks about flowers. Flower needs land and air and light and water, all in the right proportion, all at the right time. Pick it, isolate it, and watch it wither. Flowers, like people, cannot grow alone.
Okay,
Which is a nice piece of writing.
but doesn't she say something about we're the only one in the entire universe?
Yes, she says this is the only perfect planet in the entire universe.
How does
Has
she
she
know
visited
that?
them all?
Has she, like,
She's at
traveled?
the Goddard Institute for Space Studies, so maybe she's visited all the other planets in the
No
entire
other
universe.
place in the universe has nooks or perfect mountaintops or small and beautiful gardens. I want to know how she knows that. I want to know how she knows that.
So again, if you read any of the piece by Kate Marvel in Scientific American, just know that you should go right to the last paragraph when she exposes herself as a complete fraud. She is not a scientist.
Carl Sagan was a scientist, and Carl Sagan understood that the universe is vast and miraculous in the fact that life must occur anywhere it has the opportunity to. And he understood that there could obviously be all forms of life throughout the universe, but he didn't know for a fact that there was. And he wasn't going to make the assumption that there actually was. He was using the scientific method to make a guesstimation that there probably was. If there was life on this rock and that spawned a useless species like ourselves, there must be life elsewhere. But we don't know what it looks like.
To be fair, we're not completely useless.
Well,
We have people like Kate Franzen.
yes.
I'm sorry. Kate Marvel, who's really quite a marvel, who is really good at pointing out how horrible human beings can be, how non-scientific so-called scientists can act, and how horrible human beings can be towards one another for expressing their opinions validated by science. Her response, shut up.
Yeah.
I'm a fascist. You shut up. You no longer have freedom of speech, Franzen. That's my call because I'm a member of the United States government.
Right.
This is absolutely horrifying.